So, Crazy Rich Asians is doing pretty well.
These people aren't just rich, they're crazy rich.
Now, you really should have told me that you're like the Prince William of Asia.
That's ridiculous. Much more of a Harry.
It's already grossed 230 million worldwide, and they've already given the green light to a sequel. It's actually not that surprising. With the smash hit that was Black Panther earlier this year, inclusion is a hot topic, and it was only a matter of time before the Asian American market followed suit. The last Hollywood film to have an all-Asian cast was The Joy Luck Club in 1993. While it was a modest success, it didn't exactly change the game in the same way that Crazy Rich Asians is likely to.
Bok bok, bitch.
Okay, maybe like not as aggressive.
Hollywood films with Asian characters are usually period pieces, and often with a white lead in there. This nearly happened to Crazy Rich Asians too. Producers wanted to change Rachel to a white woman to make her more relatable, but The Joy Luck Club was not the first Hollywood film to try having an all-Asian cast. That honour goes to Rogers Hammerstein's Flower Drum Song.
100 media miracles are happening every day.
But before we get to that, we need to take a look at Hollywood's relationship with Asians before 1961, or specifically with China. The 1800s saw a mass immigration of Chinese people to the United States, and the point of entry for most of them was a specific part of San Francisco that would eventually become Chinatown. 1882 saw the passing of the Chinese Exclusion Act, a law which forbid any immigration from China to the United States, and it wasn't actually repealed until 1943 when China sided with America during World War II. Most of the Chinese immigrants couldn't speak English, and coupled with resentment towards them for stealing jobs, racism towards Chinese people was a-okay. So if you did see Chinese characters in the early days of film, chances are it was usually in the form of yellow peril.
Kill the white man and take his women.
I'm not even going to go there. No, just no. If it wasn't this, then it was usually a very Orientalist or exoticized view. So what changed? The Good Earth was a best-selling novel by Pearl S. Buck. The book told the story of a family of Chinese farmers and subverted the hell out of traditional Chinese values, showing the darker side of what these traditions entailed. Yikes. As a result, it wasn't too popular over there. But it was a hit in America, and enough of a success to get a Broadway adaptation, and naturally a film. The filmmakers really wanted to have an all-Asian cast. What was the problem? The only Asian leading man in Hollywood at the time was Sesue Hayakawa, and at the time this film was made, he was actually trapped in German-occupied France making another film. The lead, Wang Lung, was played by the white Paul Muni, who has been quoted as saying, "I'm about as Chinese as Herbert Hoover." The other Asian star in Hollywood at the time was Anna May Wong. The press was sure that she'd be cast as the female lead Olan, but anti-miscegenation laws meant that she couldn't play the love interest of a white man, even if he was wearing makeup to look Chinese. The solution? Yeah, she won an Oscar for it, so we'll let her have that. This was only one of many times that Anna May Wong had been snubbed from leading roles in favour of white actresses in yellowface. While blackface was fast dying out, yellowface was still seen as okay, and Hollywood didn't see a problem with using it instead of casting actual Asian actors. Fairness, I can't really think of any Asian actor who would willingly play that part. Anna May was actually going to star in the film version of Flower Drum Song as Madame Liang, but she died right before filming.
I like that.
Flower Drum Song was originally a novel by C.Y. Lee. It was a bestseller, and it was eventually picked up for adaptation by Rogers and Hammerstein.
You are beautiful.
Compared to their other works, this one isn't as well known. The original stage version only ran for a couple of years, and it's rarely revived. So the 1961 film adaptation is the definitive version as far as most people go. The musical follows the same story of the novel, but with a few changes. Master Wong is the main character of the novel, but in the musical the main character is his son Ta. Mei Li and Linda are just a pair of love interests for Ta in the book, but in the musical they become main protagonists. The musical also creates a subplot involving Mei Li's marriage contract with a man called Sammy Fong who isn't in the original novel.
Snooky, don't marry me.
Overall, the musical is more focused on romance while playing the culture clash for comedy.
And I suppose it's American style too, when a boy can do anything without his father's consent.
The musical has never been Sound of Music levels of popular, and even after the original run there's always been concerns about representation and stereotyping. The show has a very idealised look at the Chinatown community and doesn't really touch on the racism or social difficulties that immigrants would face. One critic even described it as state fair in yellowface. For a musical about Asian American culture, almost all forms of dance shown are Western. This makes sense in the songs Chop Suey and The Other Generation, which are about assimilation, There are almost no forms of Asian dance found in the musical. The closest thing is Linda Lo's song Fan Tan Fanny, which is meant to be gimmicky and not representative of actual Chinese culture. The song Grant Avenue is about celebrating Chinese New Year and even references the traditional dragon dance, but it's choreographed entirely in a Western Broadway style. Master Wong's conflict in the novel gets simplified down a lot in both adaptations. In the book, a key part of his character development is realizing that holding on too hard to his traditions is costing him his relationship with his family. And in the musical, this is kind of watered down into a stubborn old guy who just needs to get with it.
Bucks, tomatoes, wooden chopsticks.
A significant moment in the book is when he actually gets treatment for his cough. Not at a herbal place, but at a pharmacy. It's a significant moment because it marks him accepting that he lives in America now, and even the pharmacy he goes to is still Chinese-run, showing that he's not forgetting his roots. In the film, this has changed to a comedy scene where he's reluctant to invest his money in a bank, and it happens much earlier in the film, so he doesn't really factor into the last act at all.
If the song is bad,
Give me applause too.
The character who really hasn't aged well is our lead, Mei Li. In the book, she's the third girl that Tar meets in the story. His father is considering a mail-order bride, and Tar just gets lucky when he finds Mei Li and her father performing on the street. In the musical, she is the mail-order bride. She's easily the most stereotypical character in the film, fitting right into the China doll archetype, of a Chinese woman who is demure, submissive, and usually needs to be rescued. The film does actually have these little elements in there that make Mei Li more than just this stereotype. When it comes to her and her father, he is the more passive one, and she is much more proactive in getting things done.
It is unlucky to start in a new country by breaking the law.
I would only break it a little bit.
She sets about trying to get the money for food, and she's even shown stealing from Sammy's restaurant because she's starving. And late in the film, after the Helen Chow misunderstanding, she breaks off her engagement with Tar, and the reason is because she's been so hurt by all these people ping-ponging her back between different fiancés.
My heart is so hurt today. I do not love you anymore.
And we have to give credit to Miyoshi Umeki for her performance, because she gives Mei Li these little layers and beats that make her more than just a collection of stereotypes.
My daughter, we should not draw attention to ourselves.
But if I faint on the sidewalk from hunger, it would draw even more attention, my father.
These traits become bad when they're used to generalize, as in implying that all Chinese women are like that. And Mei Li is not the only female character in Flower Drum Song.
Fan Tan Fanny was leaving her man. Fan Tan Fanny kept waving her fan.
It may be lost on modern viewers, but Linda Lo was not a stereotypical character at the time.
The traditional representation of Asian women in Hollywood was not primarily sexual. That's right. If they were sexual, they were evil. Yeah. They were evil. There was that the dragon lady. That's right. And your character of Linda Lo broke all of that stereotyping. So I would say that people who accuse the film of being stereotypical, it's exactly the opposite. It broke stereotype.
Linda is sexual and pretty vampy, but she's not an antagonist. She's still presented as a likable character. The film does not punish her for her sexuality. The only thing she's punished for is lying to Tar. Her plotline simply follows many romantic comedies of the day, so in some ways Linda's race is pretty incidental. True, there is that contrast between her and Mei Li over who the right one for Tar is, but Linda is established as Sammy's love interest early on.
baby, deep down in that plastic heart of yours, you know we belong together.
So the reason these characters end up together is because they're more compatible. Both women also share the final songs as equals. Now, Linda gets this song in the middle of the movie.
I'm a girl, and by me that's only great. I am proud that my silhouette is curvy.
No wonder it's normally performed by drag queens. The song hasn't aged well, reflecting some very, we'll say, traditional views about gender and femininity.
I flip when a fella sends me flowers.
Hey, it was 1961. The anti-miscegenation laws at the time prevented men from marrying outside their ethnicity, and the immigration quotas meant that there were far more men than women in Chinatown. So all of Linda's suitors aren't just competing with each other over marrying her, but for the chance to get married at all. This was a cultural reality, and women could be very particular if they wanted.
This horse is scratched.
With this context, Linda's story in the musical makes a bit more sense. She wants Sammy to marry her, and when he won't, she looks elsewhere because she knows there'll be plenty of competition for her. Helen Chow's story ties into this as well. In the book, she's much more desperate since she's a plain girl who latches onto Tar because she knows she won't have suitors fighting over her like Linda. She's so desperate she gets him drunk, date rapes him, and tries to blackmail him into having an affair with her. When he turns her down, she commits suicide. The musical cuts most of that out. Helen is just as gorgeous as Mei Li and Linda and doesn't date rape Tar. He just gets drunk and passes out at her house. In some ways, the musical makes Helen more feminist-friendly. She gets a song called Love Look Away about her unrequited feelings for Tar. In the course of this song, she realises that her fantasies of a life with Tar are just that. Fantasies. He wants Mei Li or Linda, and she's never been in the equation at all. Helen realises this herself rather than getting dumped or rejected. She resolves this internally. It's said that when a person emigrates and starts a new life in a different country, their cultural identity is with what they grew up with. And when a new generation is born, their cultural identity is with what they grew up around. It's not until a third generation comes along that a balance is really found.
We, the people of the United States, are entitled to life, liberty, and a pursuit of happy times.
And the parents are entitled to pay the bills.
One thing I found that Flower Drum Song, both book and musical, explores very well is the question of cultural identity. Mei Li, her father, and Master Wang are all Chinese natives trying to live their lives in a country and culture they're unfamiliar with. Meanwhile, Tar, his brother, and Linda are all second-generation Chinese who are completely Americanized and have very little ties to the culture they come from. The story does not portray either side as better or worse. Cultural identity is complicated.
You can't account for what they say or do.
These characters have Chinese heritage, but they live in America now. Master Wang comes to accept his new home, but doesn't abandon his culture. He just does what someone needs to if they're living in a different country, which in this case is putting his money in a bank. Mei Li likewise wears a western gown for a party and watches American movies, but she ends the film still very much in touch with her culture. On the flip side, Tar apologizes for defying his father and still marries the girl he approves of, but still does so for love. And this happens at a Chinese wedding. Even Linda and Sammy, the two most Americanized characters, still have a Chinese wedding. The song Chop Suey is actually a pretty good allegory for how America is a bunch of different nationalities all mixed together. This balance is best underlined by the singer of the song, Madame Liang, the character who is shown to be the only sane woman compared to everyone else.
I am happy to be both Chinese and American.
If you take into account that this role was meant to be played by Anna May Wong, it has even more meaning. She was third generation and preferred to call herself Americanized Chinese, identifying as both. You can imagine that the scene was almost intended as a symbol of her passing the torch to the next generation of Asian American actors, who would enjoy much more success and prominence than she did, though still with a long way to go. In her heyday, the Chinese hated her for playing stereotypical roles, even though these were the only ones she could get. But in playing these characters, she still became a celebrity and showed audiences a side to Asians that they'd never seen before. Her legacy shouldn't be ignored, and neither should that of Flower Drum Song. True, the musical is very much a white person telling an Asian story and uses iffy practices of the time, like casting Japanese actors as Chinese characters, dubbing some of the singing with white performers and one cast member in yellowface. It very much carries the values of the time it was made, but it has plenty of elements that hold up really well. As one review of a revival put it, where is the line between giving away your heritage and being accepted in your new society? Which traditions do you choose to keep or discard? When is the time appropriate to give up the dream and return home?
Stereotypical, I don't know anything. I mean, like The Godfather, people can say it's very stereotypical too. So, no, I mean, I'm very proud of the film, and I think I haven't seen it in a long time. And watching it tonight, I still see the charm, and how can you go wrong with Rogers Hammerstein anyway? Yeah.
C.Y. Lee defended the musical too, and personally I feel the film has a pretty impressive legacy. Miyoshi Umeki, James Shigeta, Nancy Kwan, Reiko Sato, Jack Su and Patrick Ardiate are all fantastic in this film. This is a film with an Asian cast telling an Asian story that is not about the characters' relationships to white people.
The source material was written by a Chinese American, C.Y. Lee. So presumably it comes from inside, and if there's exaggeration, that's the exaggeration of a musical. It's a little enhanced.
That's right.
But it doesn't seem to me cliched or at all patronizing. One loves these characters.
Crazy Rich Asians is now breaking all sorts of barriers and giving Asian Americans representation outside of a campy, idealistic musical, and it can only go up from here. You might say 100 million miracles are happening every day.